What's up, everybody, and welcome to Nitty Gritty Sports. Today, we're going to be talking about the college football AP Top 10. Just days away from week one, there's been a bunch of storylines about teams that are potentially on the rise, teams that are supposed to break through into the upper echelon, the top teams here. Let's take a look at it right here. You got the first three teams: Georgia, Michigan, and Ohio State. I don't have a problem with any of those teams there. I think last year they definitely proved, that they're deserving of that number one, number two, and number three spot. Georgia, of course, probably the favorite to win it all again this year. My problem first comes with Alabama and LSU at 4 and 5. In my opinion, Drew, I know Alabama, I think, was a little bit overrated this year, overrated in the offseason throughout this year, and then of course the AP poll has them at number 4. I know you got some problems with that as well. So go ahead and tell me what you think about them at number 4.
Yeah, and we're definitely at agreement when it comes to number 4 and number 5. I mean, this is an LSU team that beat Alabama last year. This is an LSU team that won the division last year, and I just don't see any reason, especially heading into this season, why Alabama should be ranked ahead of LSU. And before you Alabama fans hop in the comment section and complain, hear me out, all right? Alabama is one of the most talented teams, if not the most talented team in all of college football. They were also the most talented team in college football last year. Heading into this season, you have no Bryce Young, no Jameer Gibbs, a receiving core that's got a lot of questions on it. You got some returners at receiver, but they got to take that next step forward. And then, of course, Jalen Milroe. There's a lot of questions about him heading into this season. He's not exactly the best passer of the ball. He can run lights out, and he can run with the best of them. He's a great mobile quarterback, but you got to be able to throw the ball at that level if you want to go to where you want to go. As far as defense goes, last year was probably one of the worst defenses under Nick Saban. And there's just no denying that. And I think Alabama still has some question marks, especially in the interior heading into the season. I think in the secondary, Alabama should be much improved. You'll have some returning guys back there and some veterans. But there's just too many questions about Alabama heading into the season. If they can figure out the things that are, question marks on offense, if Jalen Milroe can come out and play at an elite level, of course, Alabama has the potential to go 12-0. It's a Nick Saban coach team. You can never count them out despite how many question marks they have, Aiden. But it's just there's too many questions, and I just don't see how Alabama could be in the top 4, and especially ahead of LSU, a team that beat them and won the division last year.
Yeah, LSU beat them and won the West, like you said. And then also Tennessee played a great game against them and got the win. And then earlier in the season, Texas only lost to them by 1 point. And so, yeah, we're not saying Alabama every year is going to have a top 2 recruiting class. Obviously, they have one of the greatest coaches. I think the greatest coach to ever do it, Nick Saban. So, he can coach these guys up. He's going to be able to do something with the talent that he's got. But, moving down further down the top 10, number 6, USC. This is a team, of course, with an insane amount of hype. USC, massive fan base, and they haven't been good in years. It's no secret. Nobody's been showing up to the Rose Bowl recently. So they got Lincoln Riley. They got Caleb Williams, Heisman front runner. He's a dominant player. They're talking about teams tanking in the NFL for this guy. That's just how good he is, okay? And then they got this freshman coming in. He balled out. But at the end of the day, they gave up 28 points to San Jose State. All right, now let's not get, too ambitious with how good of a team we think they're going to be this year. They do have to play some tough teams. I know their first big game is Notre Dame, I think October 14th. And so they don't play anybody for like the first 4 or 5 weeks of college football. So it wouldn't surprise me to see USC up here, to occupy one of these top 7, top 6 spots for a while. But number 7, Penn State, in my opinion, is a way better team than USC. If you put both these teams on the field, I think Penn State rolls them over and dominates. The front 7 matters. When you're talking about some of the best teams to play college football, the front 7 is going to be a big difference changer. And just the front 7 of Penn State, absolutely dominant. They had a bad loss to Michigan last year. They played Ohio State a little bit better, but they're a football team that's going to continue to improve. That defense is going to continue to improve. We were talking earlier, they got a new quarterback coming in. He's supposed to be something special. So Penn State's something to be seen, but USC being ahead of them, it's a little bit baffling to me.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. And I think Penn State gets kind of a bad rep. Not really because people think they're a bad team or anything, but Penn State's a big name, and James Franklin is a really good coach, so I think people give Penn State really high expectations. Now, they're going to eventually have to win one of these big games against Michigan or Ohio State, but last year, 10-2, Both losses were to Michigan and Ohio State. Both of those teams are in the top three. That's a pretty good season to me. Penn State's a really good football team. Like you said, if you were to put these two teams on the field, I think Penn State would dominate the line of scrimmages. And USC's defense, it's a Lincoln Riley special. He's always going to put out a great product on offense. They're going to have a Heisman candidate quarterback always. They're going to put up 40 and 50 points. But it doesn't matter who they play. They're going to find a way to give up 20 to 30 points, regardless of who their opponent is and how good they are. And USC just you can't win a national title doing that. You might be able to scrape by and win your conference or win your division and win some top 10 games, but if you're trying to go all the way to the national championship, which is where USC is wanting to go with the talent they have, you got to be able to field a defense out there, and I just don't think they have that in them.
Yeah, if there's going to have a season like they're projected to, Caleb Williams is going to definitely win the Heisman. There's no doubt about it, just because the season that he's going to have for these guys to be, in the top four, going into the playoffs. Because like you just said, they don't have a defense. They give up 20 to 30 every single year. There was talk this season about them going and getting a bunch of big D linemen, but it looked like all for nothing. San Jose was running on them as they pleased, and I was surprised to see that with all the talk that USC had. But then coming in, we got two ACC teams at number 8 and 9. Now, the ACC, in my opinion, it's down there with the Pac-12 as far as like D1 Power 5 football. Like it's doesn't touch the Big Ten or the SEC. It's not even close. And you got Florida State first off ranked higher than Clemson, but Clemson and Tennessee had the same amount of wins. They played each other in the bowl game, both with their backup quarterbacks. They got promoted to being the starter for different reasons, but Tennessee beat them handedly. So what is Clemson doing at number 9, and then Florida State at 8? They got all these expectations. I know they're returning, their quarterback. They're returning a lot of their players, but I need to see it on the field. Like these guys that are returning, they didn't have the production that warrants 8 and 9 right here. Clemson's been overrated in my opinion for years. But Drew, what do you think about the ACC and Florida State and Clemson being 8 and 9?
Well, we definitely talked about Clemson. We were talking about Clemson last year and Dabo Swinney's inability to use the transfer portal. And we saw it last year in the bowl game. That really got exposed when Clemson went to play Tennessee. And Tennessee was just straight up looks like the better team in all aspects of the game. Like you said, both teams are playing their backup quarterback. Joe Milton outplayed Cade Klubnik. And Cade Klubnik, a lot of people have high expectations for him and said he did a great job. But, I mean, you go back and look, he has more interceptions than touchdowns thrown. So I'm not saying he's going to be a bad quarterback. He could come out and be really good this year. But the receivers are not where they need to be. They're not what they used to be at the University of Clemson. I think Clemson still has a pretty decent defense. But their offense has just been a struggle for the past few years, ever since, the Trevor Lawrence days. And until they get that figured out, Clemson's going to be that 9-3, 10-2 team and nowhere near to what they used to be. So I don't really have a problem, I think, with Florida State being ahead of Clemson. I do think, well, you talked about Tennessee. I do think Tennessee, if we were to do our own rankings, I think me and you would both put Tennessee up there in the top 10. And I think it would be fair to put them ahead of Clemson just based on what happened last year. And there's just both teams have a lot of questions, but I think it's more safe to say that Tennessee is going to come out with that high-powered offense and be more consistent and have less question marks than that Clemson team.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I would definitely have Tennessee over Clemson because, just how they looked in the head-to-head last year. I think that plays the utmost importance. If you were to put these two teams on a field and they played, who would win? And that's what I think that these ratings should be off of. And, like you mentioned, Tennessee's offense, it's been consistent with receivers and tight ends going down, with running backs being switched, with quarterbacks being switched. It doesn't matter. This offense has been plug and play. Whereas you were talking about when Clemson had Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson, the offense looked completely different than it has the last couple of years. I understand DJ Uiagalelei was not a good quarterback, but like you mentioned, Cade Klubnik, people I think are a little bit overhyped on him. I think he'll be a good quarterback. Trust me, I think he's going to be good, but I do think the hype is a little bit too much for him. So, yeah, I think Tennessee should definitely be up in the top 10. And then Texas, I think, should be on the cusp. But, Drew, I know you wanted to talk about Washington at number 10. I know you're real high on them this year. So, what is it with Washington that you like so much?
So, Washington, yeah, they're returning Michael Penix Jr. They had the top passing offense in all of college football last year. Both their 1,000-yard receivers are making a return. I think Washington's offensive line should be pretty good. I think Washington's just going to have an elite offense all around, and with them being in the Pac-12, they're not exactly going against the best defenses week in and week out. I think they can do some damage. They have a couple edge rushers who I think are going to be really good and playing in the NFL. But that defense is going to have to take a little bit of a step forward compared to where they were last year. I think they were 58th in scoring defense the year prior. I think they're going to have to get a little bit better and make a couple more stops. They don't have to have an elite defense to win a lot of games. They're one of those offenses where if you put them on the field, they're going to score a bunch of points. As long as the defense gets enough stops in the key moments, I think Washington could win almost every game on their schedule. And they're going to have plenty of tests. They're going to play USC. They're going to play Oregon. But they're going to have to find ways to make stops in those games. I think Washington's going to put up a lot of points against both those teams and have a chance to contend for a Pac-12 title. And who knows? I don't even think Washington has to go 12-0 or 13-0 to make the playoffs. I think they can, drop a game, maybe against a top 10 USC team and win the Pac-12 title and still get in. So I'm really high on Washington this year. I think they're going to be really good, and I think if they're going to do anything, it's going to have to be this year. This is going to be the last year Michael Penix is there, and a lot of those receivers should be leaving after this year as well. That's why I'm so high on Washington.
Yeah, and just, want to brush up on a couple other teams. I know Notre Dame, they always are going to have an easy path as long as they remain independent. And, with them getting a quarterback who's actually worth something, I could definitely see them sneaking in there. Oregon with Dan Lanning's second or third year, I'm not too sure. But, with who they're playing with Washington and USC, these top 5% teams are just starting to get better and better. So they're going to be on the cusp. But, definitely Tennessee and Notre Dame at 12 and 13 are two teams I would look forward to, have a great season this year. And I think could possibly have a fight for this top 10 if it were up to me, rather than some teams like Florida State, Clemson, and, of course, Alabama and USC are too high. But, there you go.
Yep. I'm glad you mentioned Notre Dame. Notre Dame is a team. I think as long as their biggest problem has always been quarterback play. I think Sam Hartman could be the answer to that. I think if they can get elite quarterback play at Notre Dame, I think they'll be really good and a team that could very well sneak their way into the playoffs. But that's going to wrap it up for this video, guys. We appreciate you watching. I know it's been a very long time since we posted a video like this, so if you're still here watching this, we appreciate you greatly. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. We're going to try to get really active with it during the season. Maybe do some live streams later down the road as well, so just be on the lookout for stuff like that. Be sure to leave down below in the comment section what you think of the AP rankings. If there's any changes you would make yourself, let us know down below, and we'll be sure to talk with you in the comment section. And that's going to be it, guys. Have a good one.